So what's her question?
Her question is, this might be an unrelated entrepreneur question, but have you ever had to work with a company owner who has had the passion of an entrepreneur but lacks the discipline of one? If yes, how were you able to do it?
So you're working for somebody that you don't respect. You're working for somebody that you don't respect and you don't know how to deal with it because you obviously think he lacks discipline, but he wants to be a company owner. I guess I have so many questions back. Like, is it a startup? Because that changes the answer. If it's a startup, you have to think about the fact that the person is going to have to be learning. They're not perfect yet. If it's a startup, then that means they're trying. So you have to be more of a leader on your own self, take an initiative without their call to actions with you because they still haven't matured into a CEO for real. If it's a bigger company and you work for a company where you don't believe in their values and their culture and the CEOs, whatever, has their own issues, and then leave. Find somewhere where a company you match with. Like, find a company where you feel happy when you work there because the culture is good. Happiness is in employment or in careers or in professions or in businesses. Happiness and joy doesn't come from what you're doing there. Like, I've met front desk clerks at real estate offices that are happier than the executives of another company.
Yeah.
It's not what you do in the company that makes you happy. It doesn't bring you joy. It's the culture. It's the environment. It's how you receive being there. So it doesn't matter really what you're doing. What matters is you're a part of something, and the thing that you're a part of should be what's fulfilling you. Because if you're in a company, for example, like I know people that worked in like financial recruitment companies. That's such a odd thing. There's how are you gonna find passion in recruiting financial people for companies, right? It's like a recruiting firm for financial positions, and I'm like, that's so kind of plain, right?
Yeah.
But the culture is amazing. The culture is great. I'm talking about a friend that told me she worked here. The culture was amazing. The everyone was so good to each other. There was team activities. There's so much culture there that she was so happy. I'm like, what do you do? She goes, literally, like, I just prospect for people that couldn't. She explained her job to me. I'm like, that sounds really boring. But then I'm like, you're so happy. Why are you happy? Because the culture of the company, the leader of the company was so great. And when did things fall apart and this person left is when the CEO was either replaced, I think, or they just changed because they brought different management in. And the culture was ruined. So the culture of a company is what brings your emotional satisfaction for being there, aside from what you do. So if it's a startup, it's going to be different. If it's a bigger company, then obviously find a culture that fits in. But the question specifically, Jay, is what do you do when you work for somebody that has the spirit of an entrepreneur but lacks discipline? Well, you can't do anything. So your job is the question back to you is, what do you want to do? Imagine you can't change the person. Now make decisions. I think most people who struggle with relationship issues, whether it's business relationships, intimate relationships, family relationships, is you consider the reality where you could change them. And so now you become very, very much bothered because you're thinking the possibility, the small chance of hope that they'll change one day. So how do I deal with it until then? No. You're doing this all wrong. Backtrack. Start with they'll never change. Mm-hmm. And if you know they'll never change, I'm not saying they can't change. They can't. People can change if they desire to themselves. But you can't make them change. I mean, very rarely do people make someone else change, but how long does that last? Was it that effective? Do they lose things in the process? Yes. So imagine you work somewhere with someone and they will never change. Now make up your mind on what you want to do with that situation. Like, do you want to leave? Do you want to stay? Is it worth it? Is the pros better than the cons? Is the cons worse than the pros, right? At least that's my perspective. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think ultimately Armin said it.
Share your own experiences too. I'm sure you.
I absolutely am about to. Yeah. So Armin said it kind of in the beginning, right? If they lack discipline, that ultimately the baseline is that you don't respect them. Like, you don't respect their work ethic. And I think that naturally you have to ask yourself if you are willing to work for someone that you don't respect or that you don't think has your best interest at heart, right? Like, if you are working for a company, whether they're the CEO or whatever, they are the leader, right? So you have to acknowledge whether you are ready to be led by this person. If they lack discipline, which is probably the number one thing you need to be able to achieve success and run a successful company. So if they lack discipline, they're pretty much lacking the one thing that they actually need to make the company successful, where you can ensure that they have your best interests at heart, right? And I've worked for many, many companies in the past, in addition to building companies. And the thing that happened with me in my early days, my friends would always joke about it, like, Jeanette can have a job. Like, she'll just quit because the moment that I sense, like, I don't like the leadership or anything like that, I'm like, I'm out. I'm not dealing with this. Because I held myself to a pretty high standard, and naturally, if the leader of this company isn't doing the same, I have to leave, right? Every single time I stayed longer than I should have, I always like was approached with some issues, and I was like, I should have left sooner. I knew it, and I should have left sooner. So, you know, I would say leave, honestly. Like, if you think like this, it's likely only going to get worse. And like Armin said, you're not going to be able to change them. They have to be willing to change themselves. So I would leave.
And it's interesting. And she's had her fair share of experiences with just like leadership, right? And I'm very similar, where if I lose faith in the leadership, I just lose faith. Like, it's very hard for me to continue. I don't know, like even for money, I can't do it. That's why I would suck in a job, because if I don't believe in what we're doing, it doesn't matter how much you pay me. I'm going to do a terrible job. Yeah. And I will leave. Like I'd rather be broke and peaceful at night knowing that I believe in my virtues, my values, than to be paid to pretend like I care about yours and I don't believe in what you're doing and I don't believe that you deserve what you have. But it's a good thing, Leilani. Like, I'll tell you something. You might have the entrepreneurial spirit in you. Just having this like perspective, it might be within you to start your own company. And what I'm telling you, like, I'm trying to inspire you here. Somebody who looks at leadership, genuinely looks at it and goes, well, you could be doing better, there's all these things you need to do better, you're really just indirectly saying, like, if you were in their position, you'd probably do better. Well, if that's the case, then challenge yourself with that. Go ahead and start a business. And you know what's funny? Sometimes you go and you realize you understand why they were being that way. Sometimes you go, it makes sense that they were like that. It's so much pressure, for example. Or you might just do a better job and you change other people's lives that work for you and they won't last long. So like, I've met people that I can tell in their mindset, if they had more people working for them, they would treat them terribly. Because I could hear the way they think about people. And like, oh, I have these people that work for me, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like, tell them what to do and I make money. I'm like, what? Like, obviously, if I had my way, I wouldn't want this person being successful at all.
Yeah.
When I see a person has terrible, like, attitude or mindset or just their belief systems are poisonous, I really hope they're not successful. Because if they are, they'll abuse it. And they'll hurt people along the way. And it's not my job to say that. It's just my belief about it. But I will say this. Those people grow. Luckily, if they do grow, they become good leaders because they realize the difference between a bad leadership and good leadership. And I've been in bad leadership myself before, where I didn't really know how to handle it. And when I handle people and manage them, when they worked with me, I was bad at it. So it turned into my strength. Remember this saying, your greatest weaknesses often turn into your greatest strengths. There's a lot of things I used to suck at that I'm amazing at today, you know, and that became my personality. It became my character, which is good. So if you see that you believe in discipline and your leader does not, then go and challenge yourself to create your own environment where you're disciplined. Now, I'm going to bring it back to you, though, because another rule of thumb is most people who have issues with other people barely look at themselves. And so I'm not trying to put the blame on you. What I'm saying is, if you see fault in others, sometimes, not all the time, sometimes it's very ironic how the universe works, is it's just a reflection of your own issues. So ask yourself this question. If you look in your own life, are you lacking discipline? If you're lacking discipline, you're going to be really bothered when you're working for someone that lacks discipline, because they're just showing you on the outside how bad it looks like that what you're doing. And I've had the situation as well. I used to be very insecure. And I work with people that were very insecure, so I hated when they were insecure around me. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, believe in yourself more. Like, you're not even confident or whatever. And I realized I'm just the one that's like that. So if that's the case and you're being honest with yourself, then you develop your own discipline on every area of life. And do not BS yourself. Go acquire the discipline, develop the discipline to achieve the goals you want in your life, fix the problems in your personal life. And then you might inspire that CEO, because if you're working in the company and they see you change, that might inspire them. Or you might filter them out of your life and find someone worthy of your fellowship or leadership, which is my answer. But great question, Leilani. I'm so happy you asked it, and it's so cool that like 5 years ago, it just blows my mind. Like, we're friends from a phone call, from a customer service phone call.
When salespeople are good, man, they're good.
I don't even think she was in sales.
Just customer service.
Just because her last name is sales, and I think I remember her saying that. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Yeah, it's crazy because like it was a customer service and she handled me so well. I'm like, oh, you're making my heart melt. You're so good, you know, those people, those customer service reps.
Absolutely.
I'm like, we gotta be friends. I think back then I even offered her a job or something like that. I was like, so like, do you want to work?
Of course you did.
No, I'm like, so like, what do you get paid where you're working? Like, can I hire you? And she's like, I'm sorry, I love what I do here. I'm like, oh, okay, no problem, but can we be friends? So it's crazy that you come out and you ask the question. I'm so happy. Ask more questions. That was a really good question.
Thanks, Leilani.
Hope the 3 or 4 different answers help you out with clarity.
Awesome.